The rain didn't just fall, it punished the earth. It came down in sheets so heavy it blurred the line between sky and stone, between sinner and saint. Thunder cracked above the ancient Roman marketplace like the gods themselves were mocking the crowd gathered below. Iron cages rattled, chains scraped over the cobblestones, and the scent of damp blood and wet metal hung thick in the air. Aurelia could taste fear, hers, and everyone else's. The square was alive with chaos. Men shouted over one another, voices hoarse from bidding. Women clutched their children closer, turning away as the condemned were paraded past. Lightning carved the clouds open, spilling white light over the marble arches and weathered statues that once stood for justice but now guarded cruelty. Beneath their gaze, Aurelia knelt in the dirt, wrists bound, her cloak plastered to her skin, her hair dripping down her face in muddy strands. She could feel the grit of sand grinding against her knees. The cold seeped through her bones. Every breath she took burned with the sting of humiliation. She used to walk this very square with her head high, herbs in her basket, laughter on her tongue. The people once called her the healer with sunlight in her hands. Now they called her witch. Traitor. Wolf lover. A man threw a stone, it struck her shoulder, sharp and sudden. The pain startled her more than it hurt. She didn't cry out. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. The crowd fed on weakness. They wanted her broken. The auctioneer's voice rose above the storm, smooth, cruel, practiced. Next. The flame touched one. The one who spoke to the beasts. Gasps rippled through the mob. All eyes turned toward her. Aurelia bowed her head. Underneath her torn tunic, beneath the grime and bruises, a faint silver glow pulsed at the base of her throat. It was the mark she'd hidden her entire life, the sign of the moon's flame. The empire called it blasphemy. Her people called it sacred. But neither side had ever shown mercy to those who carried it. She could feel it now, alive under her skin, humming faintly, desperate to breathe. She pressed her bound hands tight against her chest to hide the light, whispering to herself, "Don't move, don't breathe, don't let them smell you." Wolves. They were out there. Somewhere in the crowd, watching. She could sense them, their scent sharp as rain and ash, their presence heavy in the air like a warning. A crack of thunder rolled across the heavens, and the wind shifted. The marketplace erupted in a frenzy of motion. Traders pulled their cloaks tight, guards gripped their spears, and still the auctioneer's voice boomed on. "This one is said to have the blood of the old gods. Who dares claim her?" The words stabbed through her like a blade. Claim her. Not save. Not free. Claim. She clenched her jaw, refusing to lift her eyes. The rain beat harder, washing streaks of dirt from her face, revealing the faint shimmer of silver that refused to fade no matter how she tried to hide it. Somewhere deep inside, her power stirred, restless and afraid. She wished it would stay quiet. The crowd's roar swelled again, cruel laughter mingling with the drumming of rain. She could smell fear. Hunger. Desire. Humans were worse than beasts when they thought no gods were watching. And then, the growl came. Low. Commanding. Dangerous. It wasn't human. It silenced the square in an instant. The sound rolled through the air like thunder breaking bone. Aurelia froze. Her heart stopped beating. Every instinct screamed run, but her body refused to move. Chains dug into her wrists as she turned her head just enough to see. The crowd parted like water. From the shadowed archway above the marble balcony, he appeared. Cloaked in black, tall as legend, with a presence that pulled the breath from every chest in the square. His boots struck the stone with quiet authority, the kind that came from power earned through blood. Even the guards bowed. The storm seemed to pause for him. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat she saw his face, sharp jaw, cold mouth, eyes like molten gold burning beneath the hood. Eyes that weren't human. The murmurs began. The haunted Alpha King. Lucian Valerius. Cursed by the moon itself. Aurelia had heard the stories. Everyone had. The alpha who killed his own brother to save his pack. The king who lost them anyway. They said he wandered between life and death, haunted by the ghosts of those he couldn't save. Now he stood above her, watching. Rain traced the lines of his face, catching in the scar that ran across his cheek. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The auctioneer bowed deeply, his false cheer slipping into fear. "My lord, we didn't expect." Silence. His voice wasn't raised, yet it carried through the entire square, smooth as steel drawn in the dark. The crowd fell still, the storm itself seeming to listen. Lucian's eyes locked on Aurelia. Something ancient and hungry moved behind them. Aurelia wanted to look away, but she couldn't. It was like being caught in the pull of the tide. Her pulse quickened. Her skin prickled with awareness. Why was he looking at her like that? Like he knew her. Like he'd been searching for her. The silver mark under her skin burned hot. She pressed her shoulder against the stone pillar behind her, trying to steady her breathing. Lucian stepped forward. One hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but his eyes never left hers. "She is not for sale." The auctioneer blinked, confused. "My lord, she's been sentenced." "I said she is not for sale." The words rolled through the air like thunder. The crowd murmured, uncertain. The guards hesitated. Aurelia's heart pounded. Why would an alpha king, an enemy of her kind, interfere for her? Lucian descended the marble steps. With each step, the scent of him hit her stronger, iron, pine, and storm fire. The unmistakable aura of an alpha in control of himself, and everyone else. When he reached the base of the platform, he stopped inches from her. She could feel the warmth of him even through the rain. For the first time, she dared to lift her gaze. Those golden eyes burned through every layer of fear, every wall she'd built to survive. They stripped her bare. The crowd didn't exist anymore. The rain didn't matter. There was only him, and the quiet sound of her heart breaking open under his stare. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You should not be here, flame-bearer." Her breath caught. Flame-bearer. Only the old ones knew that word. The wolves who followed the moon's call. The ones who carried light and ruin in their blood. How did he know? Her lips trembled. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He simply reached out, brushed the chain from her wrists as if it were dust, and in that touch, the storm shifted again. It wasn't rain that fell now, it was silence. Heavy. Electric. Aurelia's power stirred beneath her skin, reaching for him, recognizing him. And for the first time, she saw the flicker of pain behind his calm, like he'd been waiting for this moment far longer than either of them could admit. He turned to the crowd, his voice sharp and final. "This woman is under my protection. Any who challenge that." He glanced at the guards, eyes glinting. "Will not live to regret it." No one spoke. No one moved. Lucian turned back to her, his expression unreadable. The world around them was chaos, lightning flashing, the crowd whispering, the storm clawing at the stones, but between them, something shifted. A thread pulled taut. A connection she couldn't explain. Aurelia didn't know if he was her savior or her doom, but in that moment, she didn't care. For the first time since the Empire called her a monster, someone looked at her and didn't see filth or fear, they saw fire. And it terrified her. Because she could feel it too, the pull between them, old as the moon itself. As the guards backed away and the crowd lowered their heads, Lucian's hand lingered near her shoulder, close enough for her to feel the heat of his skin. Her pulse thundered in her ears. He spoke again, softly this time. "They will come for you, Aurelia. You cannot run forever." Her name on his lips felt like a secret she'd never told. She didn't ask how he knew it. She didn't dare. The storm broke again, lightning splitting the sky open like a wound, and for an instant, she saw the reflection of her own silver glow mirrored in his eyes. Two curses. Two secrets. Two souls bound by something neither asked for. He straightened, turned away, and called to his guards. "Release her." They hesitated, glancing at one another, uncertain if they'd heard right. Lucian didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. The chains fell away. Aurelia's arms dropped to her sides, heavy, trembling, free, but not safe. Never safe. She watched him walk through the crowd, the storm swallowing him whole, leaving only the echo of his command hanging in the air like a vow. The people didn't cheer. They didn't dare. They only watched in silence as the haunted Alpha King disappeared into the night, taking with him the one thing the Empire couldn't control, hope. Aurelia sank to her knees again, the world spinning around her. Rain mixed with tears, she hadn't realized she was crying. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling the faint thrum of her power answering the storm. Somewhere out there, she knew, wolves still howled for her blood. The Empire still wanted her dead. And yet, something had changed. Someone had seen her. Someone who carried darkness of his own. Her lips parted, her voice a whisper lost to the rain. "Why me?" And in that broken moment, she understood, this was only the beginning. If this story already grips your soul, subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections, where forbidden love always fights to survive. The rain had quieted, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. The crowd still knelt, their heads bowed low, afraid to look directly at the man who had just defied the Empire's decree. Every breath hung suspended, as though the air itself dared not move without his permission. Aurelia's pulse throbbed in her throat. She didn't know what was happening, why the Alpha King, the most feared creature in the Empire, had stepped out of the shadows to save her. Lucian Valerius stood before her like a storm made flesh. His cloak, soaked by rain, clung to broad shoulders and armor etched with the faded sigil of his fallen house, a golden wolf's head scarred across the chestplate. Beneath the weight of his gaze, everything else blurred, the murmuring crowd, the flicker of torches, the metallic scent of wet chains. Only those eyes existed, bright, molten amber, searching her face as if he were reading something written beneath her skin. He had the stillness of a predator who did not need to prove his power. One command from him could end every life in that square, yet he stood silent, his control more terrifying than any roar. The guards who moments ago had dragged her like prey now avoided his eyes, their hands trembling on their weapons. The auctioneer tried to speak. "My lord, she is condemned by imperial law. She is not for sale." The words came low and steady, but they cut through the rain like steel through flesh. There was no anger in his tone, just finality. A kind of authority that didn't demand obedience, it assumed it. The crowd's whispers died instantly. Aurelia couldn't breathe. The sound of her heartbeat drowned the world. She wanted to shrink back, to hide, but some part of her refused. There was something about the way he looked at her, not pity, not disgust, but recognition. Lucian descended the steps. The marble groaned beneath his boots. With every step he took, the air thickened, heavy with power. The scent of him rolled over her. Iron and pine and the faint trace of smoke that clung to him like memory. It struck something deep within her, something that shouldn't have stirred, something she'd buried long ago with her name and her faith in mercy. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that the warmth from his body cut through the cold. The chains around her wrists suddenly felt insignificant compared to the tension pulling between them. His gaze dropped briefly to the faint glow at her collarbone, the silver light pulsing beneath soaked fabric. "You should not be here, flame-bearer." His voice was quieter now, but it struck deeper, threading through her ribs like heat seeking a heartbeat. The name hit her harder than any blow. Flame-bearer. The old word. The one whispered only among her kind, the ones who could call upon the silver flame, the ancient fire said to be born from the tears of the moon goddess herself. That name had not been spoken aloud since her mother's death. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, searching for some sign of mockery, but found none. Only a flicker of something like pain. "He knows me." But how? The question tangled in her chest, too dangerous to voice. Her tongue felt heavy, her throat raw from fear and rain. Lucian's expression didn't soften, but the faintest tremor crossed his jaw, a fleeting shadow of emotion that betrayed the calm mask he wore. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as though weighing something unseen. Behind him, the guards shifted nervously. One of them, braver or more foolish than the rest, stepped forward. "My lord, the council decreed she is to be delivered to the pits." "The emperor himself." Lucian turned his head, and the guard's voice stopped mid-sentence. He didn't need to say a word. The silence that followed was its own kind of violence. "Do you challenge my order?" The guard dropped to one knee immediately. "Never, my king." The storm grumbled overhead, lightning tracing silver veins through the dark clouds. For a brief moment, the light reflected off the rain-slicked marble, catching in Aurelia's eyes. Lucian saw it. His stare lingered a fraction longer, as though drawn to the very thing she had tried her whole life to hide. Aurelia swallowed hard. "Why?" she managed, her voice rough, barely audible above the rain. "Why would you?" He cut her off, not with words, but with a look that held centuries of grief. "Because I know what it means to be hunted for what you cannot change." Something inside her shifted at that, an ache she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Lucian turned to the auctioneer. "Unbind her." The man hesitated, glancing toward the imperial crest hanging above the square. "My lord, the emperor's laws." Lucian took a step forward. The air moved with him. "I am not asking." That was all it took. The chains fell. The sound of metal striking stone rang out like a bell marking the end of a life, and the beginning of another. Aurelia flexed her hands, the skin rubbed raw and red. She felt lighter, though the weight of the crowd's eyes still burned against her. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Lucian turned back toward her, and for the first time, the mask cracked. A shadow of sorrow flickered across his features, gone before it could be named. "You are free," he said quietly, though his voice held no trace of joy. Freedom. The word tasted like ashes. She didn't believe him. Nothing in this world was given without cost, especially not mercy from a king who'd once painted entire cities in blood. Lucian seemed to read her doubt. "You don't trust me." It wasn't a question. Aurelia lifted her chin, defiance trembling beneath exhaustion. "Should I?" That earned her a faint exhale, half amusement, half something else. "No," he admitted. "But you will follow me. If you wish to live." The world tilted. Follow him? The thought sent a rush of panic through her chest. He was a wolf, a ruler of those who had destroyed her kind. Yet some instinct older than reason whispered that his command was not a threat, it was a warning. Her gaze darted toward the crowd. Every face she met was painted with hatred or hunger. Even the guards who'd obeyed his order looked at her as if she were a flame waiting to devour them all. Lucian extended his hand. It was a gesture so simple, yet so dangerous. His palm was open, waiting, not demanding, but promising. Aurelia hesitated. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing with the same silent question, "What will happen if I touch him?" She didn't want to find out. And yet, she couldn't look away. The wind tore through the square, lifting her hair, scattering ashes and rain. For a moment, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Her fingers brushed his. The air cracked. A spark of heat shot up her arm, wild and blinding, not from his touch but from something deeper, something ancient recognizing itself. Her wolf stirred, stretching beneath the surface of her skin, whispering in a language she didn't understand. Lucian's eyes darkened, gold bleeding into shadow. He felt it too. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The storm roared back to life, lightning splintering the sky, thunder rolling across the city's stone walls. Then he pulled her to her feet, swift and sure, steadying her with a strength that was more restraint than force. His grip was warm, grounding. Too steady for a man called Haunted. Too human for a legend. He leaned close, his voice a murmur against the storm. "There are eyes everywhere. You breathe wrong, and the Empire will devour you before the night is over. Keep your head down. And do exactly as I say." Aurelia wanted to speak, to protest, but the words refused to form. She could only nod, the scent of him filling her lungs. Lucian stepped aside, motioning toward the darkened archway at the edge of the square. Two of his guards fell into step behind them, silent shadows with weapons drawn but eyes averted. The crowd parted without a word as he guided her through, his presence enough to bend even the proudest necks. As they passed beneath the arch, Aurelia glanced back once. The auction block still glistened with rain and blood. The chains that had held her lay in a tangled heap, gleaming faintly under the torchlight. She should have felt relief. She didn't. Freedom meant nothing when it came from the hand of a king who smelled like storm and sorrow. Lucian led her down a narrow passage carved from stone, the sound of the marketplace fading behind them. Torches flickered against the damp walls, casting their shadows long and strange. The scent of wet earth replaced the stench of the crowd. "Why me?" she whispered again. He didn't answer at first. His silence pressed against her like weight. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed, softer, almost reluctant. "Because there are whispers in this city, Aurelia. Whispers of a woman who carries the moon's fire. And a king who carries death. I don't believe in prophecy. But I've seen enough to know that some things are not chance." She shivered. "And what am I to you? A prophecy?" He stopped walking. Turned. His face was close enough that she could see the faint scar running along his jaw, the shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "A choice." Something flickered in his gaze then, something raw, something that almost looked like fear. Not of her, but for her. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed behind them. The guard stiffened. Lucian's hand moved instinctively toward his sword. A voice from the shadows called out, "My king, the council." "Not now," Lucian said without looking back. The guard hesitated, then retreated into the darkness. Lucian turned back to her, his expression unreadable once more. "You need rest. There's a place beneath the Colosseum where no one will dare follow. For now, that's enough." Aurelia's throat tightened. "And tomorrow?" He held her gaze. "Tomorrow, we survive." The words weren't comforting, but there was honesty in them, brutal and grounding. It was the first truth she'd heard in years. As they disappeared into the dim corridors beneath the city, the last echoes of the storm faded into distant rumbling. But inside her, another storm had begun, one she couldn't name, one that had nothing to do with fear or escape. Lucian walked ahead, his silhouette framed by the torchlight, and Aurelia followed, unsure whether she was walking towards safety or ruin. All she knew was that his presence, dark, quiet, and unbearably alive, had become the only steady thing in a world built to break her. And in that quiet space between footsteps and heartbeat, she understood something she hadn't dared to before. The man who had saved her was not her salvation. He was her undoing. The tunnels twisted beneath the Colosseum like veins beneath pale skin. Every turn was colder, the air denser with the weight of things unsaid. The stone walls still hummed with echoes of old blood, fights, sacrifices, beasts that had once held here for survival. Aurelia followed Lucian's broad silhouette, her bare feet splashing through puddles, every echo of their steps sinking deeper into the darkness. She couldn't tell if the tremor in her body was from fear or the cold. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the auction square, and his silence was heavier than any command. The torch he carried painted his face in brief, flickering warmth, revealing the sharp lines of his jaw, the faint sheen of rain on his armor, the scars crossing his knuckles. Every now and then, he would glance back, not to check if she followed, but as if to make sure she hadn't vanished. Her mind began to drift, as though the shadows themselves were reaching for her memories. Smoke. Screams. Silver fire licking the night sky. The past didn't come softly, it tore through her, alive and merciless. She was back there again, standing in the center of her burning village, the scent of iron thick in her lungs. The torches had come first, then the riders. Soldiers cloaked in imperial blue, their armor glinting with moonlight. She'd been 15, hiding behind the elder stones, clutching her mother's hand. Then came the pain. It started in her palms, white-hot, spreading through her arms like wildfire. Her mother had looked at her, not in fear, but with sorrow. "Don't fight it," she had whispered. "The flame will protect you if you let it." But she hadn't known how. She'd screamed. The light had burst from her hands, blinding, searing, unstoppable. When it faded, her mother was gone. The soldiers too. Only ash and the echo of her own voice remained. That was the night she became the hunted. A soft sound brought her back, the scrape of armor as Lucian paused ahead. He turned slightly, the torchlight cutting across his profile. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. She looked down. Her wrists were raw where the shackles had bitten. "It's nothing." He didn't argue. He tore a strip from his cloak, stepped closer, and began wrapping the wound with careful precision. His hands were steady, almost gentle. She wanted to pull away, to guard what little of herself remained, but his touch disarmed her more than his authority ever could. "Your people," he said finally, voice low, almost hesitant. "The ones who used to call fire from moonlight. The Empire says you're all gone." Her throat tightened. "The Empire says many things." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Then tell me the truth." The torchlight flickered between them, and for a moment, she saw him not as a king but as a man who'd seen too much. She drew a slow breath. "We were not born of magic. We were born of pain. The fire came when the wolves were driven to extinction. It was the moon's way of giving us back our strength." Lucian's gaze didn't waver. "And you?" "I was the last to bear it. But I couldn't control it. The night my mother died," her voice cracked. "I lost everything." His eyes softened, not with pity, but understanding. He tied the cloth around her wrist, his fingers brushing her skin. The contact was brief, but it left heat behind, a pulse that didn't fade. Without a word, he turned and continued down the corridor. They reached a heavy wooden door bound in iron. He pushed it open. The room beyond was dim, lit by a single brazier glowing faintly in the corner. A war tent had been pitched within the stone chamber, maps scattered across a table, weapons leaned against the wall, the smell of steel and smoke lingering in the air. "Rest here," he said. "No one will disturb you." She stepped inside cautiously, her eyes tracing the room. The tent was sparse, but not impersonal. There were traces of the man behind the title, the open journal beside a dagger, the unfinished cup of wine, the faint scent of pine clinging to his cloak. Lucian removed his armor with slow, deliberate movements, revealing the fabric beneath, dark, torn at the shoulder, marked with old scars. There were so many. Some looked like claw marks, others like burns. He caught her staring. "They're reminders," he said simply. "Of what?" "That even kings can bleed." He poured 2 cups of wine but only placed one in front of her. His own remained untouched. "I don't drink," he murmured. "Because of the curse?" The words escaped before she could stop them. He looked at her sharply. "You've heard the stories." "Everyone has." The haunted Alpha King. The one who killed his own pack. The silence that followed was suffocating. For a moment, she thought he might throw her out, or worse. But instead, he turned away, staring into the brazier's glow. "They weren't just my pack," he said finally. "They were my family. My blood. My brother led them against me. He said I'd broken the ancient code by taking the throne through conquest instead of birthright." His voice was calm, but beneath it was the sound of something splintering. He was right. He looked down at his hands, flexing them as though they still remembered the weight of that night. "I took what wasn't mine. And the gods punished me for it." "How?" she asked softly. He met her gaze again. "They made me kill the ones I loved most. I see them still. Every time I close my eyes. The flames crackled. The air thickened with a silence neither could escape. Aurelia studied him, the king who commanded armies yet looked like a man barely holding himself together. Then why save me? Lucian's eyes flickered toward her, gold and shadow intertwined. Because you remind me of what I lost. She swallowed hard. You don't know me. Maybe not. But I know what it looks like to carry something you can't control. To wake every day and feel it burning through you, waiting to destroy what little piece you built. Her breath hitched. He had seen her, truly seen her. Lucian turned away, gripping the edge of the table. When I saw you on that platform, I thought the Empire had found another way to mock the gods. To cage something they feared. But then you looked up, and it wasn't fear I saw in your eyes. It was defiance. She felt that defiance flicker again now, small but alive. Defiance keeps me breathing, she said quietly. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Then maybe there's still hope for both of us. The torchlight dimmed. Rain whispered faintly beyond the stone walls. The brazier's glow painted their shadows against the tent canvas, long and distorted. She moved closer without meaning to, drawn by something neither could name. Your brother, she said softly. What happened to him? Lucian's eyes darkened. He's still out there. Wearing my curse. Commanding what remains of my pack. The Empire calls him loyal. I call him damned. Do you want revenge? His jaw tightened. I want peace. But peace doesn't come to those who wear the crown of wolves. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it does. If you stop running from what haunts you. He turned sharply, their eyes locking. The air between them thickened, heat, danger, something wild pressing at the edges. I'm not the one running, he said. Her pulse quickened. Then what are you doing, Lucian? Trying to remember what it feels like to be human. The confession hung in the air like a wound exposed. She could feel the weight of it, the truth behind his restraint. He was a man at war with himself, one half predator, one half ghost. She didn't move when he stepped closer. His hand rose, stopping just short of her cheek. You shouldn't be here, he murmured again. Not in this place. Not near me. Then why bring me? His eyes flickered. Because I couldn't watch them touch you. Because I saw something in you that terrified me. Her breath caught. And what's that? The part of me that's still alive. The brazier flared as if responding to the words. The scent of smoke and iron filled the room. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the tension coiling between restraint and something more primal. Aurelia's gaze dropped briefly to the mark at his throat, a faint silver line that pulsed with his heartbeat. She didn't know what it was, but her wolf stirred at the sight, restless and drawn. Lucian noticed. Don't look at me like that, he said, voice rougher now. Like what? Like you see past the curse. I see what's real, she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned away as if afraid of what he might do if he didn't. Rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow, we leave the city. The council will come for you before dawn. She hesitated. And you'll protect me? He didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, until I can't. The truth in those words sank into her like cold water. Lucian moved to the far side of the room, his back to her, shoulders tense. He stood like a man used to carrying the weight of worlds, and for the first time, she saw how alone he truly was. Aurelia lowered herself onto the edge of the cot, watching him in silence. Every part of her screamed to stay distant, to remember who he was, the Alpha King, her enemy, her savior, but something deeper whispered otherwise. Two souls bound by the same ruin, circling the same fire. The rain outside began again, soft and relentless. And in that moment, the haunted king and the exiled flame-bearer shared the same silence, not peace, not comfort, but recognition. A bond forged not in mercy, but in pain. And though neither dared speak it aloud, both knew the truth. The moment she stepped into his world, neither of them would ever be free again. They rode in silence beneath the bruised dawn, the sound of hooves sinking into the mud and the metallic jingle of chains that still hung from Aurelia's wrists. The Empire was far behind them now, but its ghosts clung to the wind, whispering through the twisted trees like regret that refused to die. The road had long turned to dirt, then to moss, then to nothing but roots and fog. Ahead, the forest rose in great pillars of stone and light, the forest of Lumen, where even the Empire's soldiers refused to tread. Lucian rode ahead, his cloak drawn tight, his shoulders broad beneath the first silver rays of morning. His wolf senses were alert, though his expression remained unreadable. The air shifted around him like a tide, commanding, restless, ancient. The longer she looked at him, the more she realized he didn't ride through this world. He carried it with him. Aurelia followed, her body aching, her spirit flickering between exhaustion and something else, an energy she didn't understand, humming low beneath her skin. Every time her eyes caught the moonmark glowing faintly on her collarbone, a strange warmth stirred in her chest, like the echo of a heartbeat not entirely her own. As they crossed the threshold into the forest, the sound of the world changed. The wind went silent. The earth seemed to breathe. Every root, every leaf, every glimmer of light carried a pulse. It was not a forest, it was memory itself, alive and watching. Lucian's horse halted before a clearing where stone ruins jutted from the ground like the bones of forgotten gods. Moss grew thick along the carved edges, and on one fallen archway, Aurelia could see faint symbols burned deep into the surface, ancient runes that pulsed faintly with moonlight. "This is where it began," Lucian said quietly. "Before the Empire. Before kings." He dismounted, his boots sinking into the damp soil. The scent of pine and rain wrapped around him. Aurelia hesitated, sliding down from her horse. The instant her feet touched the ground, the air shifted, denser, warmer, charged. She could feel it, the hum of unseen voices in the air. Whispers brushed against her mind. Words she didn't understand, yet somehow recognized. Lucian turned to her, watching her reaction. "They can sense you," he said softly. "The old ones." Her pulse quickened. "What do they want from me?" Before he could answer, a movement stirred from the shadows, a figure emerging slowly from between two towering stones. She was frail, wrapped in robes of woven bark and ash, her hair the color of snow, her eyes milky and unblinking. The seer moved as if carried by the wind itself. Lucian bowed his head slightly. "Elder." Her voice was brittle, trembling, yet it carried power that made the air vibrate. "You bring her here, Alpha of the broken line." Aurelia froze. The seer's gaze turned toward her, sightless yet piercing straight through flesh and bone. "She bears the mark," the seer murmured, reaching a trembling hand toward Aurelia's chest. "The moon's flame, the one the Empire feared would rise again." Lucian's jaw tightened. "She doesn't even know what she is." The seer smiled faintly, a knowing curve of her lips. "Oh, she knows. The fire remembers." Aurelia's breath hitched. "I don't." The seer's hand brushed the space above her heart, not quite touching but near enough that the mark beneath her skin began to glow. The faint shimmer turned to a pulse of light, spreading up her throat and down her arms. The air filled with a low hum, ancient and steady. The forest responded. The trees bent slightly, leaves trembling, roots shifting beneath the soil as if bowing to something greater than time. Aurelia gasped, stumbling back. "What's happening?" The seer's voice deepened, as though other voices joined her own. "The flame-bearer and a broken Alpha, bound by ruin, chosen by prophecy. When moon meets blood, and fire touches shadow, the old curse will shatter." Lucian stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Prophecy," he muttered. "Those words belong to a dead age." "Yet here you stand, haunted by its truth," the seer replied. Her eyes, though clouded, seemed to find something in him. "You carry the curse of the fallen, Alpha. Bound by chains of guilt, of brother's blood. But she," the seer turned to Aurelia again. "She carries the flame that can unmake what you've become." Aurelia shook her head, trembling. I don't want this. I never asked for it. The moon does not ask permission to rise, the seer said softly. It simply does. And then the vision took her. It started as a flicker, light bending around her, the world blurring at the edges. Then came the sound, the low thunder of hundreds of paws hitting the ground. She blinked and saw it, wolves, endless wolves, kneeling under a blood-red sky. Their fur shimmered silver beneath the light of two moons. Above them stood Lucian, bound in chains of darkness that wrapped around his throat, his wrists, his chest. The more he struggled, the tighter they pulled. His eyes burned gold, desperate and wild. And she, Aurelia, stood before him, her hands aflame with silver fire. Every beat of her heart pulsed through the vision like thunder. She reached toward him, her voice echoing through the void. But when her fingers touched his chest, the fire spread, devouring the chains until they shattered like glass. Then came the scream, not of pain, but of release. The wolves held in unison, their voices rising to the heavens, and the blood sky began to fade. She fell to her knees, breathless, trembling as light poured from her palms. Lucian's voice reached her distantly, muffled, pulling her back. Aurelia! She opened her eyes. The forest was spinning, her pulse racing, her skin slick with sweat. Lucian's hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. The seer stood behind him, unmoving, as though she had seen this countless times before. Aurelia gasped, shaking. That wasn't real. Lucian's voice was quiet but firm. It was a vision. She shook her head. No. I don't want it. I don't want any of it. Lucian's jaw clenched. You can't run from what's written in your blood. Then why me? She demanded. Why not someone else? I can't even control what's inside me. His eyes softened, the golden light dimming with something like sorrow. Because the Empire hunts what it fears, and it fears you more than anyone. She turned away, pressing her hands to her face. I'm not their savior. I'm the reason my people are dead. Lucian hesitated, his voice dropping to a low rumble. You think I don't know what that feels like? To be the weapon that destroys everything you were meant to protect? Aurelia looked up, meeting his gaze. Then why help me? He exhaled slowly. Because maybe saving you is the only way I can forgive myself. The seer's voice drifted between them again, faint but sharp as a blade. The moon has chosen, whether you wish it or not. The path will not wait for the broken to be ready. Lucian turned sharply toward her. And if the path leads to ruin? Then ruin will come, the seer whispered. But through it, the world may finally heal. The wind rose, rustling through the trees, carrying with it the sound of distant howls. Aurelia's chest ached, the mark on her collarbone still burning faintly. Lucian took her hand, slowly, as though afraid she might pull away. We should move. The Empire will track us here. She hesitated, her fingers trembling in his grip. You believe her, don't you? I believe what I see, he said quietly. And what I see terrifies me. They left the seer standing among the ruins, her voice following them into the mist. Beware the brother of shadows, Alpha. He waits for the flame to rise. The path wound deeper into the forest, where moonlight pooled like silver water and the air shimmered with unseen energy. Aurelia's mind spun with fragments of the vision, chains, wolves, fire, blood. Lucian rode beside her now, close enough that their hands brushed with each shift of the reins. He didn't speak, but his silence said enough. He'd seen something too. Something he wouldn't yet name. When they reached the edge of the ruins, Aurelia looked back one last time. The stone still glowed faintly, as if remembering her presence. The mark on her chest pulsed once in answer, then dimmed. The forest closed behind them. The prophecy had been spoken, and though neither wanted to believe it, both knew deep down the same truth. Some destinies don't wait to be accepted. They simply awaken. The forest swallowed her in silence. The kind that presses against your chest and steals your breath. Her steps were uneven, her pulse a storm beneath her skin. The scent of burnt earth still clung to her fingers, and when she lifted her hand to the fading light, faint silver sparks danced across her palm before dying. Every spark felt like a heartbeat lost. Every heartbeat, a reminder that she could destroy everything she touched. Behind her, the ruins were quiet. No cries. No clash of steel. Only the echo of what she'd done. She could still see their faces, Lucian's soldiers, the ones who had fought beside him, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that turns loyalty to ash. They'd looked at her as if she were death itself. And maybe she was. Aurelia stopped, the damp wind tangling her hair, and turned her gaze to the horizon. Dawn bled slowly over the tree-line, soft pink and gold trying to cover the world's wounds. It failed. The forest was still soaked in red. Her breath trembled. She could still hear Lucian's voice, the way it had cracked when he'd shouted her name during the battle. For a heartbeat, she thought he would come after her. That he would choose her, despite the fear. But when she'd turned back, his eyes had betrayed him. They'd shone doubt. Just for an instant, but it was enough. That hesitation had cut deeper than any blade. Aurelia pressed her palm to her chest, over the mark of the moon's flame. It pulsed faintly, as if reminding her that she was never alone, even when she wanted to be. The flame within her whispered, restless and wild, begging to be freed again. She clenched her fists and whispered through gritted teeth, "No more." The whisper carried, soft and broken, but the forest listened. The trees seemed to bow inward, as if mourning with her. The scent of rain lingered, mingling with smoke and ash. Somewhere behind her, a wolf howled. Not a cry of hunting, but mourning. The sound twisted through her spine, dragging her heart in two directions, toward him, and away from everything that would ever make her safe. Lucian's shadow moved through her memory, his hand reaching for her during the chaos, his jaw tight, his voice rough with command and something else she couldn't name. The way he'd looked at her when the fire burst from her body. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't hatred. It was something closer to recognition. And yet, he'd still hesitated. The forest opened before her into a clearing, the ground blanketed in moss and shards of moonlight. The silence felt too heavy, too still, like the breath before the earth speaks. She sank to her knees, the cold soil biting her skin, and buried her face in her hands. The sob came uninvited. It wasn't graceful. It was raw. For so long, she'd believed she was cursed. That the silver flame inside her was punishment for surviving what no one else did. But now, as her tears soaked the ground, she realized it was more than punishment, it was purpose. And she hated it. She wanted to be human again, to touch without burning, to love without fear. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and steady, whispering stories of the moon's children, those born between the worlds of flesh and flame. "You'll know your purpose when the world tries to end you," she had said. Aurelia never imagined that purpose would come wrapped in ruin. A branch cracked behind her. She froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but the air shifted before she could move. The faint scent of pine and storm fire rolled in, unmistakable. Lucian. Her body betrayed her before her mind could catch up. She turned, and there he was, emerging from the trees like something carved from the night itself. His armor was streaked with blood, his eyes still burning gold under the dawn's pale light. He stopped a few feet away, his breathing harsh, his expression unreadable. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to scream, to demand why he didn't stop her from walking away. But her voice trembled instead. "You should have stayed with your soldiers." His eyes didn't leave hers. "They'll live." She laughed bitterly. "If they live, it's despite me." Lucian stepped closer. The scent of smoke and rain wrapped around her again, grounding and unbearable all at once. "You saved them. You just don't know how to control it yet." She shook her head, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her cheeks. "I destroyed them. I saw the fear in their faces. I saw it in yours." He flinched, almost imperceptibly. but she caught it. Lucian closed the distance between them, his voice rough, low. I wasn't afraid of you. Then what was that look, she demanded. Because it wasn't trust. He didn't answer. His jaw flexed, his gaze heavy with something unspoken. The silence stretched until it ached. When he finally spoke, his words came out like confession. It was recognition. You carry what I tried to bury. Aurelia's breath caught. Lucian looked away, his hand tightening at his side. I lost control once. The night my pack died, I felt something burn inside me. Something dark. I thought it died with them. But when I saw your flame, I remembered. Her anger faltered, replaced by something softer, more dangerous. You think we're the same? He looked back at her then, and the truth in his eyes hit her harder than any blade. No. You're stronger. You still fight it. The words settled between them, heavy with understanding and hurt and something that felt too close to desire. For a moment, neither moved. The forest seemed to breathe with them. Aurelia finally stood, her knees trembling. You shouldn't have come after me. I didn't come to bring you back, he said quietly. I came to ask you to live. The simplicity of it unraveled her. No demand, no command, just a plea wrapped in exhaustion. Her throat tightened. You think I want to die? I think you want to stop fighting yourself. His honesty was unbearable. Because it was true. She turned away, unable to face the warmth in his tone, the quiet ache that lived behind his words. Everywhere I go, people burn. Maybe it's better if I disappear. Lucian's hand brushed her shoulder, gentle but unyielding. You disappear, and they win. The Empire, Cassius, the ones who hunted your kind, they win. Is that what you want? Her body trembled beneath his touch. I want peace. Then fight for it, he said, voice low and rough. With me. She turned slowly, eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was no distance between them. Only silence. Only the hum of power, restrained and alive. The air shifted. Somewhere deep inside, her flame stirred, not in anger, but in recognition. The same way it did when he'd first looked at her in that Colosseum. She whispered, Why me? Lucian's gaze softened, his expression unreadable. Because every prophecy starts with someone who never believed they deserved it. The words sank deep, their truth undeniable. She felt something inside her shift, a small piece of hope she thought had died in the flames of her village. She took a shaky breath. And if I burn again? He stepped closer, his voice a whisper against the rain. Then I'll burn with you. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The air grew warmer, denser, charged with something ancient and inevitable. And though neither of them moved, everything between them did. Two broken souls, one bound by ghosts, the other by fire, standing at the edge of ruin, daring the world to try again. It was the first time she didn't feel alone. And that, more than the prophecy, more than the flame, terrified her. The rain came softly that night, the kind that didn't fall so much as it whispered. The forest dripped with the rhythm of it, slow, steady, like the earth itself was trying to breathe again after everything it had witnessed. Aurelia sat near the flicker of a small fire, her knees drawn close, her cloak heavy with water. The flame fought the damp, rising and falling like her heartbeat, fragile and defiant. Her hands trembled as she fed the embers another twig. She hadn't slept since the battle. The screams still echoed in her skull, looping endlessly. When she closed her eyes, she saw fire and blood and Lucian's face in the smoke. She wanted to forget, but every raindrop carried the memory back to her. Somewhere behind her, branches shifted. Her hand went instinctively to the dagger she'd taken from a fallen soldier. The sound was soft at first, then closer. Then the scent of pine and iron reached her again, unmistakable. She didn't turn. She couldn't. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice breaking between defiance and exhaustion. Lucian stepped out from the shadows, the rain sliding down his armor in thin streams. He was limping, blood dark against his thigh, and the look in his eyes, gods, that look, wasn't the same one she'd left behind in the ruins. It wasn't command. It wasn't fury. It was regret. "I told you I'd find you," he said softly. His voice carried no threat, no weight of royalty. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his choices. Aurelia didn't answer. She turned back to the fire, watching it sputter. "You bleed too easily for a king." He gave a quiet, bitter laugh, sitting a few feet away, wincing as he did. "You burn too easily for someone trying to disappear." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them could yet say. The rain hissed against the fire, steam curling upward like breath. Lucian pulled off one of his gloves, his hand shaking slightly. He held it near the flame, as if the heat might thaw something deeper than his skin. "They were my brothers," he said after a long while. "My pack. Every night, I still hear them. The screams. The betrayal. It doesn't stop." Aurelia's chest tightened. There was no armor in his voice now. No alpha. Just a man haunted by ghosts that wouldn't die. She stared into the fire. "And yet you keep leading." He looked at her. "What else is there to do?" She swallowed, the words heavy on her tongue. "Stop fighting what can't be saved." Lucian's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking toward the trees. "You sound like someone who's already given up." "Maybe I have." He studied her face, and she hated how easily he could see through her. "No. You're still here. People who've given up don't build fires." Aurelia didn't want to feel it, the warmth his words carried, but it slipped through her defenses anyway. She looked down at her hands, the faint shimmer of the silver flame still etched into her palms like scars that refused to fade. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My father tried to stop it. To stop me. And when he reached for me..." Her voice cracked, the rest caught in her throat. Lucian waited. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened, the rain soft against the silence. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she said finally, her voice trembling. "But it was like something inside me woke up and saw him as a threat. I watched the fire take him, and I couldn't stop it. I tried. Gods, I tried." She pressed her hands to her face, as if she could hide from the memory. The fire popped, a spark leaping into the air, and she flinched as if it were punishment. Lucian's voice came low, steady, almost too gentle. "You were a child." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I was his daughter." That broke something in the air between them. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep down, in the space where grief and guilt live side by side. Lucian's hand moved before thought could stop it. He reached toward her, his fingers brushing the back of her hand. It wasn't a command or pity, it was understanding. A bridge between monsters who'd once been innocent. The touch was light, but it stole the breath from both of them. Her pulse raced under her skin, his hand trembled, as if afraid she might vanish. Aurelia whispered, "You should hate me." Lucian shook his head. "I can't. I tried to hate you in that Colosseum. I told myself you were dangerous, reckless, cursed. But I saw the same fear in your eyes I see in mine every night." She stared at him, the firelight catching the edge of his scars. "And what do you see now?" He hesitated, eyes softening. "Someone trying to forgive herself." The words landed like a truth she didn't want to believe. She looked away, her throat tight. "You think forgiveness is that simple?" "No," he said quietly. "But it starts with someone seeing you and not turning away." Her breath hitched. The flames danced between them, gold and silver and shadow, flickering across his face. For the first time, she let herself look, really look, at him. The exhaustion carved into his features. The old pain hiding beneath control. The man beneath the alpha. The rain softened outside, tapering into a hush that made the night feel almost sacred. Aurelia's voice was barely a whisper. "Can I trust you?" Lucian's eyes didn't waver. I see you. All of you. The world stilled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, time folded in on itself, past and present and the unspoken future collapsing into this one fragile, dangerous heartbeat. He leaned closer. She didn't move. The warmth of his breath touched her lips. The pull between them wasn't sudden, it had been there from the start, growing quietly beneath fear and fire. Now it thrummed like something alive. His hand brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek, slow, deliberate, as if afraid to shatter the spell between them. Their lips were so close she could taste his breath, smoke, rain, and something wild. Then the sound came. A long, mournful howl tore through the forest, distant but sharp enough to split the air. Lucian froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. The fire snapped, throwing wild shadows across his face. Aurelia's eyes widened. They found us. He didn't move. His eyes flicked toward the darkness beyond the trees, golden light flaring in them. The sound wasn't just a warning. It was a call. A summons. Cassius's wolves. Lucian's hand fell away from her cheek. The warmth vanished, leaving the air cold and trembling with everything that almost happened, and everything that now couldn't. He rose slowly, his expression shifting back to the one she'd seen on the battlefield, sharp, unreadable, burdened. Stay close to the fire, he said. If they come, you run. She stood too, her voice breaking. And you? His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. I made them. I'll end them. The words were final, heavy with an old pain. He turned toward the trees, his body already shifting, the faint shimmer of fur beneath flesh, the low growl deep in his throat. And just like that, the fragile peace between them fractured again. Aurelia wanted to stop him, to say something that could hold him there in that human moment, but the words never came. The forest swallowed him whole, his form vanishing into shadow and rain. She stood by the fire, the glow flickering against her face, and felt the ache of what almost was, and the terror of what waited beyond the trees. The rain began again, slow and relentless, washing away the warmth of his touch. And in that small clearing, surrounded by ghosts, Aurelia whispered into the dark, "Don't die, Lucian." The wind carried her words away, but the forest heard them. And somewhere in the distance, the answering howl broke her heart. The return to the capital felt nothing like victory. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with a silence that pressed against Aurelia's chest like a warning. The city loomed before them, towers of marble, banners of crimson and gold snapping in the wind. To others, it was the empire's heart. To her, it was a cage built from old fears and older lies. Lucian rode beside her, his shoulders drawn tight, his expression unreadable. The scars on his face caught the dying light, the weight of his crown invisible yet suffocating. They hadn't spoken since that night in the forest. Too many words had been left unsaid, words that could shatter what little trust remained between them. The gates opened with a groan of iron. Soldiers lined the streets, their armor gleaming. Whispers followed Aurelia like a plague. Witch. Monster. Curse. Her wrists bore the faint marks of old chains, and though Lucian had promised her safety, the sight of the council's black banners above the Colosseum turned her stomach to stone. He dismounted first, his hand brushing the hilt of his sword as though instinct alone could protect them from what waited inside. They said it's only a hearing, he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. She met his eyes, her voice steady though her pulse betrayed her. You don't believe that? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Inside, the Colosseum was transformed. No jeering crowd this time, only the elders, cloaked and hooded, seated upon stone thrones beneath the symbol of the empire, the golden wolf devouring the moon. The scent of incense hung thick in the air, masking the metallic tang of fear. Aurelia was led to the center, the old chains clasped once more around her wrists. Each link felt heavier than before. She lifted her chin anyway, meeting the cold eyes watching her from above. An elder rose. His voice carried across the stone. Aurelia of the Flame. You stand accused of crimes against the crown and the sacred order of wolves. But the Alpha King, in his mercy, offers you a chance at redemption. Lucian stepped forward then, his voice strong, measured. She has proven her restraint. She has saved lives, not taken them. The flame is not a curse, it is the mark of the old blood. It should be protected, not destroyed. Murmurs rippled through the council. The elder turned toward him, eyes narrowing. You speak as though her fire has not already consumed your judgment, my king. Lucian's jaw clenched. My judgment remains mine. But Aurelia felt it, the tension in his stance, the way his hand hovered near the chain between them. He was torn between loyalty and instinct, and that truth sank into her like a blade. Another voice rose, colder, sharper. Cassius stepped into the light. His armor gleamed like polished bone, his smirk a cruel mirror of Lucian's restraint. Brother, he said smoothly, how long will you protect the creature that destroyed your pack? The words hit like a slap. Gasps echoed. Lucian's eyes darkened, a flash of something primal beneath control. Choose your next words carefully, Lucian warned. But Cassius only smiled wider. You think you know her? You think that flame won't burn you next? Look at her, she can't even control it. You saw it in the ruins. You saw it when she burned your men. Aurelia's throat tightened. Shame coiled through her veins like venom. The elder raised his staff. We will see the truth. Let the flame-bearer reveal her gift before the council. Lucian's voice dropped low. You don't have to do this. She looked up at him. If I don't, they'll kill us both. The guards pulled her to the center of the arena. The floor shimmered faintly, runes etched into the stone beneath her feet. A circle of torches surrounded her, bright, golden, oppressive. Her heart pounded. She could feel the flame stirring beneath her skin, restless, hungry, whispering to be free. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. One spark. Just one controlled flame, she told herself. Enough to prove she wasn't a monster. But then Cassius spoke again, his voice dripping venom. Show them what you really are. The runes beneath her flared to life. The elder's chant rose, deep and rhythmic, ancient words twisting through the air like smoke. Her pulse spiked. Something wasn't right. The energy crawling up her arms wasn't hers. It was being drawn, forced, ripped from her. She screamed as silver light burst from her palms, wild and blinding. The crowd gasped. The elders stumbled back. The fire spread faster than she could contain it, leaping from torch to torch, devouring air and shadow alike. No, she cried, fighting it, but the enchantment only fed it more. Lucian moved forward, reaching for her. Aurelia, stop. But she couldn't. The flame had found its voice now, screaming through her veins, pouring into the world in waves of silver heat. Cassius's laughter rang out above the chaos. There she is. The cursed one. The elders shouted orders, guards rushed in, but the air had already turned molten. The flames danced across the stone stands, consuming robes, steel, flesh. The scent of burning was everywhere. Aurelia fell to her knees, tears cutting clean paths through the soot on her face. I didn't mean to. Lucian reached her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders, his voice raw. It's not you, it's them. They'd bound you. But when she looked up at him, what she saw wasn't certainty, it was fear. Just a flicker, but enough. That hesitation again. The same look he'd given her in the ruins. The same doubt that never truly left. Her breath hitched, her voice trembling. You still don't trust me. His lips parted, but no words came. The flame surged higher, swallowing the platform where the council sat. Cassius vanished into the smoke, his laughter turning to a snarl. Aurelia tore herself free, stumbling backward. The silver light wrapped around her like a storm. You fear me too, she whispered. Then the ground split with a crack of thunder. Light exploded outward, and everything went white. When the smoke cleared, the arena was unrecognizable: charred stone, molten iron, the stench of ruin. Bodies lay still where the council had stood. Lucian called her name, but the echo only met silence. High above the city, in the shattered remains of the colonnade, a trail of silver flame cut through the night sky like a comet. Aurelia was gone. The Empire would call it betrayal. The council would call it prophecy fulfilled. But for Lucian, standing amid the ashes, it was something else entirely. It was loss. The kind that broke not with sound, but with the slow collapse of everything he dared to believe. The last ember fell at his feet and died, and the world seemed to stop breathing. He looked toward the forest on the horizon, where the sky still shimmered faintly silver, and whispered the only truth that remained. She was never the monster. Then he turned away, and the silence that followed carried the weight of a kingdom on the brink, and the heart of a man who had just lost the only light he'd ever feared to love. The Empire bled beneath the moon. Smoke rose from burned villages, the scent of ash mingling with the faint sweetness of wolf-bane fields trampled by war. For weeks, the name Aurelia lingered like a curse upon every tongue. Mothers whispered it to frighten their sons from rebellion. Soldiers spat it before battle for courage. And in the royal court, Cassius carved it into banners of conquest, claiming it was the mark of the flame that betrayed the Alpha King. Lucian's kingdom fractured. The loyalty of his shifters splintered under the weight of suspicion. Every howl in the distance carried doubt. Every fire in the hills reminded them of the witch who'd turned the council to ash. But far beyond the reach of rumor, beyond the Empire's eyes, she lived. The northern cliffs were barren, a place where even the wind seemed afraid to linger. The sea below roared like an endless creature, swallowing the rocks in tides of silver foam. That was where Aurelia made her refuge. The woman who had been hunted, bound, deceived, now walked barefoot among ancient stones, her flame no longer a curse but a companion that answered to her will. Each night, she trained beneath the fractured moon. The voice came first as a whisper, soft as the sea breeze. You fear your gift because you were never taught its name. She turned toward the cliffs, eyes glowing faintly silver. Who are you? I am what they tried to bury. I am the first flame, the breath that gave life to the wolves. The moon's light deepened, shimmering across the water until it seemed alive. Aurelia closed her eyes and felt the pull within her, the old rhythm of something ancient and wild that pulsed in her blood. They feared you because they feared me, the voice continued. But the flame you bear is not destruction. It is balance. It is judgment. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her hand. Silver fire bloomed between her palms, no longer raging, no longer untamed. It shimmered like liquid moonlight. She breathed in and felt the power settle through her body like the first breath after drowning. I am not your weapon, she whispered. No. You are my air. The days that followed blurred into ritual. The cliffs became her temple, the wind her hymn. She learned to listen, to the earth, to the sea, to the heartbeat of the world. When the power surged too high, she anchored it in the rhythm of her breathing. When her anger burned too hot, she fed it to the moonlight until it softened. But peace was fragile, and the world below burned. Cassius's army spread like rot through the southern forests. He declared Lucian's bloodline unfit to rule, swearing the throne would be his. Villages loyal to Lucian were purged. The moon shrines were desecrated, their keepers slaughtered. Wolves who refused to kneel were hunted and branded. In the capital, Lucian stood alone. His throne room was silent, the banners of his house torn and scattered. Each night he looked toward the northern cliffs, toward the direction she had fled, and his heart clenched with the memory of her scream, the look in her eyes when he hesitated. He had hesitated once, and lost everything. Now, he stood before a fractured army, his armor dented, his blade dulled with the blood of brothers turned enemies. His pack had fallen back to the sacred ruins of Valia, the cradle of the first wolves. They made their stand there, among the crumbling statues and forgotten altars, where the moonlight once crowned kings. When Cassius came, he came not as brother, but as conqueror. His army moved like a tide of iron and hate, their armor blackened with the soot of burned villages. The clash echoed through the valley, steel against claw, oath against blood. Lucian fought like a creature possessed. His blade tore through the enemy line, but for every enemy he felled, 10 more rose. His wolves fell one by one, their howls fading into the night until only silence remained. Blood slicked the stones beneath his boots. His lungs burned. He looked toward the shattered altar where his ancestors once knelt, and for the first time in his reign, he felt the weight of mortality press against his chest. Cassius emerged through the carnage, his armor cracked but his eyes alight with victory. "Still standing, brother?" he taunted, his voice carrying across the ruins. Lucian steadied his breath, raising his sword though his arm trembled. "You've killed everything we built. Everything our father bled for." Cassius smirked. "I've killed the lie. You let weakness rule you. You let her break you." Lucian's voice came low, dangerous. "Say her name again." Cassius's grin widened. "Aurelia. The flame that turned you into ash." Lucian charged, the clash of steel ringing through the ruins like thunder. Sparks flew, blades screamed, blood sprayed across the stones. They fought with the ferocity of beasts, brothers bound by destiny yet divided by hunger for power. But Cassius's army pressed closer. Lucian was cornered, his breath ragged, his sword heavy. His knees hit the stone. The blood from his wounds soaked through the cracks, seeping into the altar beneath him. Above, the clouds shifted. The moon broke free. Lucian's voice cracked. "Aurelia." The name left his lips like prayer. And the heavens answered. The wind stilled. The sea beyond the cliffs roared louder, and the moon flared, blinding, silver, alive. The air trembled with energy as a pulse rippled through the world. Every creature felt it, every wolf, every spirit, every soldier. Then the light split the sky. A streak of fire descended, trailing silver flame. The earth shook as it struck the ruins, sending waves of light across the battlefield. Soldiers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Cassius turned, his sneer faltering. From the heart of the crater rose a figure wreathed in silver fire. Aurelia. But she was no longer the woman who fled the capital. Her hair flowed like threads of starlight, her skin glowed with the shimmer of molten moonstone. The flame no longer clung to her, it moved through her, alive, sentient, divine. Her eyes burned with the calm of creation and the fury of judgment. Every wolf felt it then, the call of the old blood, the power that existed before crowns and thrones. They dropped to their knees, trembling under the force of her presence. Cassius stumbled backward, rage and disbelief twisting his face. "You." Aurelia's gaze met his, and the world itself seemed to pause. "I warned you once," she said, her voice a resonance of wind and fire. "I am not your curse. I am your consequence." Cassius charged, sword raised, but before the blade could reach her, the silver flame surged outward, a wave of pure energy that tore through the field. The soldiers vanished in an instant, consumed not by heat but by light so pure it unmade them. The ruins cracked. The sky bled silver. The moon's reflection rippled across the sea as if bowing to her. Lucian, bleeding and broken, stared up at her through the smoke. His vision blurred, but her light cut through the haze like salvation. She descended to him, her steps silent, the ground blooming with silver flowers where she walked. The flames around her dimmed as she knelt beside him. Her fingers brushed the blood on his cheek. He could barely speak. "You came." Her voice softened. "You called." He laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound, and then coughed, blood staining his lips. "They said you were gone. That you were lost." She shook her head, her hair catching the moonlight. "I was never lost. I was remade." He reached for her hand, his touch trembling. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Her thumb brushed across his knuckles. "You were never meant to be my savior, Lucian. You were meant to be my witness." Her power flared once more, washing over the battlefield. The dead began to dissolve, their souls freed from Cassius's curse. The land itself seemed to breathe again, color returning to the broken stones. Cassius lay at the edge of the ruin, half his armor melted, eyes wide in horror as he tried to crawl away. "You think you're a god?" he spat. Aurelia turned her gaze on him, calm as the tide. "No. I am what your greed awakened." With a whisper, she raised her hand. A silver spark leapt from her fingertips, piercing his chest. His scream echoed into nothing. When the light faded, nothing remained but ash. The silence that followed was not peace, it was reverence. Lucian struggled to his feet, watching her with awe and sorrow intertwined. "You were never the curse," he said softly. Her eyes met his, shimmering with tears that caught the moonlight. "No," she whispered. "I was your redemption." He sank to one knee before her, head bowed, not in submission, but in recognition. The last of the moon's light bathed them both, the silver flame wrapping around them like a benediction. The ruins no longer felt like a graveyard. They felt like a beginning. Aurelia turned her face toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn began to break. The power within her settled, no longer wild, no longer hungry. For the first time, she felt whole. Lucian rose beside her, his hand hovering near hers. "What happens now?" She looked at him, her gaze soft but unyielding. "Now, the flame returns to its purpose. It was never meant to destroy kingdoms. It was meant to awaken them." He nodded slowly. "And us?" A faint smile touched her lips. "We burn. Together or apart, that choice will always be yours." The wind carried her words across the valley, over the ashes of war, into the forests beyond. The wolves raised their heads and howled beneath the dawn, their voices echoing with something older than pain, older than vengeance, hope. And as the sun rose over the broken empire, the silver flame faded into morning light, leaving behind only the faint scent of moonfire and the memory of a woman who was never a sacrifice, but the beginning of everything reborn. Smoke drifted in thin spirals through the air, carrying the faint scent of iron and burnt stone. The ruins were quiet now, too quiet. The wind that once carried screams moved through the shattered columns like a breath through hollow bones. Aurelia stood at the edge of what had been a battlefield and now looked more like a graveyard for gods. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, the reflection of a moon sinking beneath the horizon. The fire within her had gone still, not extinguished, but silent, like a heart between beats. Around her lay the remnants of an empire that had sworn to destroy her, now reduced to ash. Yet victory did not taste like triumph. It tasted like salt and sorrow. The silence pressed against her chest until it hurt. Lucian stood a few paces behind her, his armor dark with blood, his hands unsteady. The storm of battle had left its mark, scratches, burns, bruises that would never fade, but none cut deeper than the look in his eyes when he saw what she had become. She did not turn to face him. She could feel his gaze, heavy with awe, guilt, and something far more dangerous, love. "You should hate me," she said quietly. The wind carried her voice, soft and fractured. "I burned your throne. I destroyed your people's faith." Lucian's voice came low, almost reverent. "You burned lies. You destroyed what was killing us." Aurelia's fingers brushed over the cracked stone of the altar beside her. The surface was still warm. "And what if what I am kills you too?" He took a slow step forward, his boots scraping against the rubble. "Then it would be an honest death. The first truth I've known in years." She turned then, her eyes meeting his. In them was the reflection of everything he'd lost, and everything she'd become. She saw the man beneath the crown, stripped of power and pride, standing in front of her not as alpha, but as the last soul brave enough to love what the world feared. For a moment, time held its breath. The air between them shimmered with the ghost of the silver flame. Her heart ached with something fierce and fragile, something that had no name but felt like belonging. But beneath it all, an old fear whispered. Power like hers was never left unchallenged. Somewhere beyond the borders of this broken land, someone would rise again to hunt her. Lucian's hand lifted, hesitant. "You don't have to face it alone." Aurelia stepped closer, her breath mingling with his. The distance between them vanished, but the world around them felt wider than ever. No one can walk my path, Lucian. Not even you. You think I'd let you go after this? His voice broke, the sound raw. You think I can go back to ruling a kingdom that no longer exists? Her lips trembled, not with fear, but with something deeper, a truth she had tried too long to silence. You were never meant to rule this world, she said softly. You were meant to change it. He laughed once, a quiet, bitter sound. And you? She looked past him, to the horizon where dawn struggled to rise through the smoke. I was meant to burn it down. The words lingered like a wound. Neither spoke after that. The silence between them became an unspoken promise, of love that could never settle, of souls bound by fire and ruin. The ashes beneath their feet glowed faintly, as if remembering the heat of her flame. A single ember rose from the ground and drifted upward, carried by the wind. Aurelia watched it ascend until it vanished into the pale sky. The light of it caught in her eyes, making her look almost celestial. Lucian whispered, "What will you do now?" She turned back to him. "What I must. There are others like me, hunted, hiding." The prophecy was never about destroying the world. It was about setting it free. He reached for her again, and this time, she did not step away. Their fingers touched, briefly, barely, and in that contact, the remnants of the battlefield seemed to fade. For a heartbeat, they stood in a world that might have been, one where fate had been kinder. Then she pulled back, her gaze steady. "When they ask who I was," she said, "tell them I was not your curse." "I'll tell them you were my light," he murmured. Her smile was soft, almost human. "No, Lucian. I was your fire." And then she turned, the silver flame unfurling from her back like wings. It lifted her into the air, scattering the dust and ash, bathing the ruins in pale light. Lucian shielded his eyes, watching as she rose higher, until she was little more than a shimmer against the dawn. The world below her looked fragile, almost peaceful. She could feel the pull of it, every wound, every prayer, every voice that still believed in redemption. The power within her answered, alive again, whispering of choices, of destinies unfinished. The flame pulsed once, steady and sure. Would they fear her now? Would they call her monster again? Or would they finally see the truth, that everything she destroyed to save them? Her voice carried on the wind, low, haunting, unbound by distance. "Would you have feared me," she asked the unseen world, "or followed me into the fire?" The question hung in the air long after she was gone, sinking deep into the hearts of those who would hear it. A question not meant for kings or warriors, but for those who understood what it meant to lose everything and rise again from the ashes. And somewhere, beneath the ruins, where embers still glowed, Lucian whispered his answer to the empty sky. "I would have followed." The flame above flickered once in response, as though it heard. Then it vanished into the clouds. A new silence fell, not the silence of death, but of waiting. The kind of silence that comes before something is reborn. And then, soft as breath, a voice, familiar, warm, alive, broke through that stillness, wrapping the listener in its quiet pull. "If this story lit something inside you," it murmured, "subscribe to Sophie's Romance Collections. Here, love isn't gentle, it burns, heals, and rises from ash." The sound faded, but its echo lingered like the warmth of a dying flame, an invitation, a promise, a whisper that somewhere beyond the ashes, the next story had already begun. Dawn crept slowly across the ruins, a hesitant light that painted gold over gray stone and ash. The night had been long, cruel, and holy all at once. The world looked bruised beneath the pale horizon, battered but alive. Lucian stood at the edge of what was once the battlefield, his armor scorched, his hands blood-stained but steady. He could still smell the remnants of her flame in the air, sweet, metallic, eternal. A soft gust of wind stirred the dust around him, whispering against his skin like a memory that refused to fade. He thought she had gone, vanished into myth like every other legend that burned too bright. But then, a faint shimmer broke the line of dawn, and he turned. She was there. Aurelia descended slowly from the sky, her feet touching the earth with the weight of someone who no longer belonged entirely to it. The silver fire that had once roared around her now glowed gently beneath her skin, like starlight woven through veins. Her hair, once tangled and wild, drifted in the breeze, faintly luminous. Lucian stepped toward her as though afraid she might vanish if he blinked. "You came back." Her eyes lifted to his, eyes that no longer looked human, yet held every human ache. "I couldn't leave it unfinished." He reached out, hesitant. When his fingers brushed hers, warmth bloomed up his arm, alive, pulsing. Her touch no longer burned. It soothed. The ground beneath them still trembled faintly, the heartbeat of a world adjusting to her power. Around them, the ruins seemed to hum, a sound that wasn't wind or stone but something deeper, older, aware. Lucian looked toward the horizon, where smoke rose from distant lands. "The Empire will come for us again." She nodded, calm but resolute. "Let them. Fire is not meant to be hidden." He studied her face, memorizing the curve of her mouth, the quiet strength in her gaze. "And if they try to destroy you?" She smiled faintly. "Then I'll show them what it means to be reborn." The silence that followed was soft, fragile, threaded with something unspoken. He wanted to tell her that he feared what she had become, that she was no longer just the woman he had saved from the auction block, but something vast, untamed. But when she looked at him, all that fear dissolved. "Stay," he whispered. Her eyes closed briefly, as though she could feel the weight of that word pressing against her ribs. When she opened them again, the silver in her gaze flickered. "I can't," she said. "Not yet." He searched her face for some sign, hope, promise, anything that might tether her to him, but found only the steady glow of destiny. The light of dawn grew stronger, washing her in warmth. He thought it might erase her entirely, that the day would claim her as its own. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand finding his. The contact sent a shiver through both of them. The air crackled, not with flame this time, but with memory. All the moments they had survived, the blood, the betrayal, the broken vows, seemed to fold into that single touch. "You changed me," she whispered. "Even when I didn't believe I could be more than what they said I was." Lucian's jaw tightened, emotion threatening to fracture the calm he wore like armor. "You showed me there was still something worth saving." She tilted her head, her expression soft. "Then save it, Lucian. Save them. Led them not as a king, but as a man who remembers what love costs." The sun breached the mountains, spilling gold across the fields. For a heartbeat, they stood bathed in light, their shadows stretching long and entwined across the scorched ground. And then the wind shifted. A sound broke the stillness, low, deep, primal. It came from beyond the cliffs, rolling through the valley like thunder. The kind of sound that did not belong to any creature still bound by mortal form. Lucian's instincts flared. The hairs on his arms rose. Aurelia's head turned sharply toward the mountains. The growl echoed again, longer this time, vibrating through the stones beneath their feet. "That's not the wind," she said quietly. Lucian's voice dropped to a whisper. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time since the battle ended, fear touched her features. The silver mark on her collarbone pulsed once, then again, faster, as though responding to something unseen. Lucian moved closer, his body tense. "Is it one of Cassius's remnants?" "No," she breathed. This is older." The ground shuddered once, hard enough to crack the earth at their feet. Birds scattered from the treetops, crying into the pale sky. From the mountain's shadow, a faint light flickered, a dull, rhythmic glow, like the heartbeat of something massive stirring below the surface. Aurelia took an involuntary step back. "It's waking." Lucian frowned, eyes narrowing. "What is?" She turned to him, her expression distant, as though hearing something he could not. "The other half." Before he could ask, another sound joined the rumbling, a voice. Soft, serpentine, almost human. It carried across the wind, so faint it might have been imagined. "She is not the only one." Lucian spun, scanning the tree line. His senses sharpened, instinct screaming warning. Then he saw it, a figure cloaked in gray, standing just beyond the broken archway. The hood concealed his face, but when the light caught his throat, Lucian saw it, a mark glowing faintly beneath the skin, identical to Aurelia's. The figure tilted his head, watching them. Even from that distance, Lucian felt the weight of his gaze, cold and knowing. Aurelia's flame flickered to life, silver light flaring along her arms. "Who are you?" she called out. The figure did not move closer. His voice, when it came, was steady, chilling in its calm. "You think your story ended with the flame. But the fire has two hearts." Lucian stepped forward, placing himself between Aurelia and the stranger. "If you've come to threaten her." The figure's faint smile was visible beneath the hood. "Threaten? No, Alpha King. I've come to finish what she began." Before Lucian could move, the ground split open between them. A surge of dark energy rushed upward, swallowing the light. Aurelia staggered back as the earth groaned beneath her. From the fissure, shadows poured out, thick, alive, whispering her name. The hooded figure's eyes glowed beneath the cowl, not silver, but black shot through with gold. "The goddess gave her flame," he said. "But she gave me her shadow." Aurelia's light fought against the darkness, flaring violently. Lucian grabbed her arm, anchoring her as the wind tore around them. "We need to go," he shouted. But Aurelia shook her head, her voice trembling. "If we run now, the world burns again." The two forces, light and dark, collided between them, the impact sending shockwaves through the ruins. Columns toppled. The sky darkened. The ground convulsed beneath their feet. The figure lifted a hand, and the shadows recoiled, gathering around him like obedient hounds. His words carried like a curse. "You were never the end, Aurelia. You were the beginning." And then, as suddenly as he had appeared, the figure dissolved into the air, leaving only the echo of his words behind. Lucian held her, his breath ragged. "What does he mean?" Aurelia's eyes glowed brighter, her voice low. "It means we're not done." The wind died. The tremors ceased. But somewhere deep beneath the mountains, the growl came again, louder this time, closer. The world itself seemed to exhale, as if preparing for something vast and terrible. Aurelia turned to Lucian, her expression unreadable. "This isn't over." He stared at her, torn between awe and dread. "Then what happens now?" She looked toward the mountains, the silver flame flickering softly along her shoulders. "Now," she said, "we see what wakes when the gods remember their mistakes." The earth trembled once more. The light of dawn dimmed as clouds rolled across the sun. The ruins shuddered, dust falling like rain. Lucian reached for her hand, gripping it tightly as the ground cracked beneath them. "Whatever comes," he said, his voice rough, "we face it together." Her gaze softened. "Together," she echoed. The tremors grew. A roar, deeper, older, filled with fury, ripped through the air. The mountains split, light and shadow bleeding from their peaks. The air shimmered, heavy with prophecy. And then, silence. Only the faint echo of the hooded figure's voice lingered on the wind, almost tender, almost cruel. "She is not the only one." The earth groaned in reply, a warning. A promise. And as the scene faded to black, only one thought remained. The fire had been reborn, but something far older had awakened to meet it. This was not the end. It was only the beginning.